Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to WWP-Reacts as we talk about the political stories of this week, at least as reported by the New York Times, Washington Post, if you want to get your information from there, which I like to read both sides. It's also in the Washington Times somewhat, but I just wanted to share what's going on out there. I find it interesting. I'm coming to you from the man cave of WWP Reacts, where getting ready for a big Georgia game and then a big Georgia Tech game after that. See if we can keep this undefeated streak going. All right, let's get right to the first one. The first one is about the Trump officials moving into military residence D.C. area. So Pete Hegseth, I guess, has moved into Fort McNair. He's moved into a quarters that is usually reserved for the chairman of or the Army's vice chief of staff. Guys like General Reamer and others have lived there. What's ironic is that Pete Hegseth was what, a captain? I think he made it to major um, after he retired or got out of the National Guard. He never served in the Army. It was the Army National Guard he served in. Um, but that, uh, um, but now he's living at Fort McNair, which is a great location for him to be close to, President Trump. And I think that's a good idea because uh, Department of War, or used to be Department of Defense secretaries, or sec defs, we used to call them, I guess they call them sec wars now, um, didn't live at Funganeer. And so you scroll down through this article. Um, According to the Defense Department, Mr. Hegseth is paying $4,655 per month to live at Fort McNair this year. So he's paying, I guess, to live there. So good on him. He should, because he's not a military member. He's just Secretary of War. So this is along the Anacostia River, right near Nationals, the Washington Nationals baseball team park that used to be such a horrible area. Fort McNair was the only nice thing there, but now it's a beautiful area. If you've never been there, I've been down there a lot as a retired field grade officer. What's funny, uh, Hexa could have never lived there as a captain or a major, as I would never been able to either. Well, I live in a nicer house than that now, but um, it's procedure. Um, so the vice chief's position is going to be across the Potomac, probably at I'd say Fort Meade. I'm not sure. Anyways, that's where the vice chief will be. Um, Mr. Hanks has settled into a home which has an army history. Notes is guarded by two Revolutionary War era cannons. Other Trump residents also took residence of housing built and designed for senior admirals and generals in the area. A handful of White House officials have lived in military housing, and I think guys like Marco Rubio, soon after he was sworn in, Secretary Marco Rubio moved in a couple of doors down from his Pentagon counterpart. Mr. Rubio lives there mostly alone. His family have to stay in Florida, which I don't blame them. Christy Nome lives in a government representation facility. What the heck does that mean? Owned by the Coast Guard and is paying fair market rent, which is good. They should. So there you go. That's the first story that the defense that the New York Times thinks is a big political story of this week, one of the top five. Give me a break. I like this. So, General Hughes said that the residents had a brass plaque noting that the Army's 1980s recruiting service, BLE, came from its previous occupants, General Maxwell Thurman. Quarters 8 also had a small gravesite in the yard. He said where General Thurman buried his dog, who died while he lived there. His dog's name was Fido. Um, Whoop de doo. Okay. All right, let's go to the next story. Let me pull up the next story here as we go into my email. In Utah, Trump's vision of homelessness begins to take shape. State officials promise large scale involuntary addiction and mental health treatment at Salt Lake City's edge. Critics see a prison or a warehouse. When I was growing up in the 70s and I worked at a place called Renton State School, it was a home for um, involuntary addiction and mental health treatment. We called them, well, I don't want to say it because it's not appropriate these days, but I worked there as an orderly, taking care of some of these crazies that now, guess what, are walking on your city streets, and hence why we have such a big problem. A glimpse of the future homelessness policy in the age of President Trump is to take 16 acres of pasture in the outskirts of Salt Lake City, where the state plans to place as many as 1,300 homeless people in what supporters call a services campuses, and critics deem as a detention camp. Of course, the Dems, the progressive. So they're really regressive, right? Because progressive means you're doing good. What the Dems do is they do bad, right? They're regressive. They want people cradle to grave tied to the government, through food stamps, what have you, and all that. But you think they'd find this good, though, right? Get them off the streets. But it's the Dems that closed all those Rentham State schools and other state schools like that I worked in, and put all these homes on the streets. And now it's a mess. I don't think 1,300 will help, but I think we could do a lot more. Look at that. It's beautiful. That's a beautiful campus. What's wrong with that? Conception, I mean, who wouldn't want to live there? It's better than living under a fucking highway. All right, let's go to the third story because I don't want to keep this too long. Trump team offers to keep same ballroom donors incognito, and I don't blame them. Our taxpayer dollars are not paying for this ballroom, and that's a beautiful thing. If you think, well, let's just juxtapose that to our great, not so great President Obama, who I don't even think is an American citizen, but that's another story. He put a basketball court in. He tore down and put an indoor basketball court. Guess who paid for that? Me and you, our taxpayer dollars. That's a beautiful thing, ain't it? All right. Well, he's going to keep those donors incognito, and I don't blame him. President Trump's aides have promised transfer. You know what? You don't have to tell who donors are that's helping make the White House a better place to be. That's ridiculous. A list released last month by the White House of more than 3 dozen donors omitted the donor amounts. So what? They're not donating to a campaign. They're donating to America's house to make it a better place. They're giving their money free and clear to make the White House a better place. I don't understand what newspapers like the Times and the Post have with Americans stepping up to make things better. Anyways, you can go back and read that article for yourself in the New York Times if you like. Let's go to number 4. Saudi prince. Let's pull it up. Saudi prince plans ambitious U.S. visit, but is also opening ties with Israel is unlikely. Okay, I didn't know hear this. This is new. This is new to me, anyways. New to Bill. WWP-Reacts. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is pushing for a security pact and a nuclear deal with the United States. Yet it is not expected to recognize Israel soon, despite President Trump's wishes. Well, yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia. This is a country that raised Osama bin Laden. I mean, like really? I can understand why they're Jew hating Saudis, and they are Jew haters, by the way, anti Semites, Jew haters. Well, see, the Jewish land, the Jews ripped off the face of the earth. And if you don't think so, well, I've been over there, I've seen it. It's all bullshit that they're just playing with Trump because they know how to get along. All right, buoyed by his success in brokering a ceasefire deal in Gaza, President Trump has claimed that he could soon secure another big force by convincing Saudi Arabia to recognize him for the end of the year. I doubt that will happen, but whatever, who cares? Prince Mohammed, the kingdom's de facto ruler, establishing relations is a distant goal. So it's a goal. That'll probably take years rather than months, analysts say. But it's a goal. Before Trump came in, it wasn't even a goal. They weren't even thinking about having a deal or relations with Israel. So I think that's a win-win. Trump's won. Again, he's got the prince, the kingdom's ruler, Prince Mohammed, to say, hey, that's a goal of ours. All right, let's go to our last story and wrap this thing up because you're probably getting sick of hearing me talk. Under Trump, becoming a U.S. citizen gets harder. Oh, well. I came here, this is a true story. I came here in 1971. I'm from Canada. My father, who was in the medical profession, America needed medical healthcare professionals in the late 60s. My father was hired by another Canadian who came down to become an American on a work visa. to work at a prominent hospital in Boston. You all know the hospital. He worked there until 1983 when he went to another hospital in the metro Boston area. But the gist of the story is I had to live with my mother and my brother and sister for 3 years in Canada before we could immigrate with green cards into the United States. It was a hard process, is what I'm trying to get at. And that's what it ought to be. It ought to be a hard process. My father had to live with a green card, live in a boarding house, and he would drive home to Cornwall, Ontario, near Montreal, every other weekend or so to see his children for 3 years. Why? Because he wanted to come to the United States where the medical profession is the pinnacle of worldwide medical health care. So now we stripped all that away. Becoming a U.S. citizen is a piece of cake these days. In the 2010s, 2020s, come on, it's so easy now. And now they're putting back into place the things that I had to go through. I did not become a citizen, by the way, until 1987. I'd already served 8 years in the United States military, but wanted to become a United States military officer. So I then applied for citizenship. It took me 2.5 years to get my citizenship. 2.5 years, I couldn't serve as an officer. Even though I had the degrees, I couldn't serve as an officer in the United States military, but I could serve as an enlisted man, which is fine by me. I love this country. Trump administration is erecting new hurdles for lawful permanent residents applying for U.S. citizenship, a part of the broader effort to tighten an immigration system that federal officers say has become too lax. Well, it has become too lax. When I came to become a citizen, it was about a 2 year process, like I said, from 85 to 87. And the final thing was I had to go to the office in Boston, the Secretary of State office there, and for immigration. And I'd take a test, literally a sit down written test, which I bet you, I don't want to use a bad number, but let's say conservatively, 75% of Americans that were born here could not pass. I studied for days and weeks and months to pass that test. And I passed it. And then I was sworn in at Faneuil Hall in Boston. And that day in October 1987 is the proudest day of my life. More so than getting my bachelor's degree, more so than my graduating from Officer Candidate School, more so than graduating from basic training, more so than getting my master's degree. Being a citizen of this country is a huge responsibility, and it should be hard if you're not born here to become one. And so I applaud President Trump on those efforts. And with that, I will quit talking about the top 5 stories. I meant to share my screens, and I apologize, but we'll make sure we do that next time. If you like this information, please like and subscribe and comment, and I will keep this type of stuff coming. Thank you. Have a great day. Have a great Sunday. Take care. Bye bye.